He was the man history almost forgot. While Neil Armstrong etched his name into eternity with the first step on the moon, and Buzz Aldrin posed for the photographs that would circle the globe, Michael Collins drifted above them in solitude, alone in the command module Columbia, orbiting a world no one had ever circled by themselves. The weight of the mission rested on him, but his name rarely left the footnotes of Apollo 11. And yet, before his death, a sentence slipped into the record. A sentence so out of character it sounded like fiction. Collins allegedly admitted, "They told me not to tell anyone what I saw near the moon." 7 words, and the silence of 50 years cracked open. The quiet astronaut, the disciplined soldier, the test pilot who had spent a lifetime in understatement, hinting at something forbidden, something NASA supposedly wanted buried. Was it truth? Was it myth? Or was it the perfect projection of our desire to believe that the Apollo missions held secrets never shared? This is not Armstrong's tale of footprints on lunar dust, nor Aldrin's long years of public fascination. This is the shadowed story of the third astronaut, the one who circled endlessly in the dark, who stared out of the porthole into infinity, and who carried a burden no one else could comprehend. Today, we enter that silence, and we ask, what did he really see? And why did he wait until the very end to say it? The Forgotten Seat in Apollo 11. Apollo 11 was designed as a 3-man ballet, each role choreographed with absolute precision. Armstrong was the commander, the face of the mission. Aldrin was the lunar module pilot, ready to walk the surface. And then there was Collins, the command module pilot, the man who would never touch the moon. His job was to remain in Columbia, orbiting above, waiting, and ensuring that the only ship capable of returning to Earth was alive when his crewmates came back. It was not glamorous. There would be no photographs of Collins stepping onto alien soil, no famous quote broadcast to billions. His assignment was vigilance. He had to keep the spacecraft's systems balanced, check oxygen, fuel, navigation, power, all while isolated from Earth half of every orbit. For hours at a time, his voice could not reach Houston, and Houston's voice could not reach him. If disaster struck Armstrong and Aldrin, if Eagle failed to launch from the moon, Collins would be forced into the most tragic command in human history, returning to Earth alone, leaving 2 men behind on the lunar surface. He admitted later that this scenario haunted him. He rehearsed it in his mind, piloting Columbia back, facing the press, carrying the unbearable weight of survival. "I would have been a marked man for life," he wrote, knowing the world would never forgive him, though it would not have been his fault. And yet, NASA chose him for this very reason. He was steady. He was precise. He was the man who would not crack under silence, who would not improvise for the sake of drama. That is why his supposed admission, decades later, feels so dissonant. If anyone was least likely to invent a sensational claim, it was Michael Collins, and that contradiction is what gives the story its sting. Before he became the most solitary figure in space, Michael Collins was the product of discipline, precision, and an almost stubborn humility. Born in 1930 to a U.S. Army general, he grew up in a household where order was not optional. He graduated from West Point, just like his father, then chose the Air Force. While others sought the glamour of fighters in Europe or Korea, Collins gravitated toward test piloting, the crucible where machines failed and men were expected to keep calm while staring death in the face. At Edwards Air Force Base, Collins learned that panic was the enemy. Pilots there flew experimental aircraft balanced on the edge of physics, and survival required clarity under pressure. Many of his peers perished in fiery crashes. Collins lived because he had the rare ability to stay cold even when alarms screamed. That same quality caught NASA's eye. In 1966, he flew on Gemini 10. The mission pushed the boundaries of what astronauts could endure. Collins performed 2 spacewalks, stepping outside into the void, tethered only by a cord, juggling tools and experiments while the Earth spun silently below. He described the sight not with bravado, but with understatement. "Fantastic," he wrote, but also confusing. Even in awe, his notes were analytical, measured, never drifting into exaggeration. This was the Collins who entered Apollo 11, a man trained to observe carefully, to speak sparingly, to calculate before he confessed. That is why his alleged words before death, hinting that he saw something near the moon and was told to remain silent, echo louder than if they had come from anyone else. They clash with a lifetime of restraint. So who was Michael Collins? Not a forgotten extra in the Apollo drama, but a quiet soldier engineer whose silence made the mission possible. And paradoxically, it is that very silence that makes the mystery around his final words almost irresistible. The loneliest human in history. On July 20th, 1969, as the world held its breath for the giant leap, Michael Collins was not on the moon. He was circling it, alone. Inside the command module Columbia, he traced path after path above the lunar surface, a solitary witness to the most famous event in modern history. For nearly 24 hours, while Armstrong and Aldrin worked on the ground, Collins orbited 30 times in utter isolation. Each orbit lasted just under 2 hours. For half of that time, Columbia swung to the far side of the moon. When that happened, all radio contact with Earth snapped to silence. No reassuring voices from Houston. No chatter from his crewmates. Just Collins, the hiss of life support fans, and the steady pulse of his instruments. For 48 minutes of every circuit, he was the most cut-off human being in existence. No one had ever been farther from communication than Michael Collins was in those moments, and yet, he wrote later that he did not feel fear. He felt peace. He described the experience as tranquil, almost religious. To him, the silence was not a void to dread, but a kind of sanctuary. He was busy, after all, checking oxygen, fuel, power systems, calculating trajectories, preparing Columbia to be ready the second Eagle lifted off. Duty kept fear at bay. But this solitude also created fertile ground for legend. Imagine sitting alone, circling a lifeless world, staring out the porthole at infinite blackness. If anything unusual flickered by, an unexplained light, a drifting object, there was no one to verify it. Only Collins, his notebook, and his own memory. This is the stage where the alleged final admission gains weight. For the man history remembers as calm and precise, the one who endured hours of cosmic silence, even the hint of something unspeakable becomes electrifying. Because if Michael Collins truly saw something, no one else could have witnessed it. The secret would have died with him, unless, as the story goes, he finally let it slip. The alleged admission. For 50 years, Michael Collins carried a reputation built not on words, but on restraint. He was the quiet professional, the forgotten astronaut who never complained about being left off the moon's surface. His memoirs were thoughtful, his interviews measured, his legacy one of humility. That is why what emerged near the end of his life startled so many. According to accounts preserved in sources like the transcript-style PDF, Collins allegedly admitted, "They told me not to tell anyone what I saw near the moon." A single sentence, stripped of context, yet heavy with implication. What did he mean? Who were they? And most importantly, what exactly did he see? The claim is maddening in its vagueness. There is no mission log entry to match it, no official NASA transcript, no corroboration from Armstrong or Aldrin. The PDF offers no technical coordinates, no timestamp, no photographic evidence. It is simply the line, dropped like a stone into the still waters of history, and yet the ripples are impossible to ignore. Why? Because of who Collins was. If Aldrin, often open to speculation about UFOs, had said it, many would have dismissed it as eccentricity. If Armstrong had said it, the world might have filed it as another misinterpreted quote. But Collins, the quiet one, the man who lived in understatement, was the least likely of all to break ranks with such a dramatic claim. That contrast is what gives the story power. When could it have happened? If Michael Collins truly saw something strange, then the next logical question is simple. When? Apollo 11 was a mission of tightly choreographed stages. Every second was documented, every maneuver rehearsed to exhaustion. And yet, there were windows of opportunity, moments when Collins was alone, when no other eyes could witness what he might have seen. The first window came before Eagle, the lunar module, separated from Columbia. In these early orbits, debris from staging still floated nearby, panels discarded during translunar injection, ice crystals vented from tanks, fragments of hardware tumbling slowly in sunlight. For a pilot trained to notice every detail, a glint outside the window could have felt uncanny, especially in the alien stillness of lunar orbit. The second window was the long vigil while Armstrong and Aldrin were on the moon. During this time, Collins orbited alone for nearly a day, circling 30 times. Each orbit gave him 48 minutes of radio silence while Columbia slipped behind the moon. In those blackouts, he was the only conscious human in the universe, with no communication to anyone else. If ever a site could be locked away as a private memory, it was here. The third window came during the tense rendezvous when Eagle launched back into orbit to dock with Columbia. The procedure was delicate, and once completed, Collins had to jettison Eagle's ascent stage and other hardware. Objects drifted and tumbled away. Lights could flare, shadows could deceive. If something looked unusual at this stage, it might be hard even for Collins to categorize in the moment. 4 buckets of explanation. When confronted with a mysterious claim, the disciplined way forward is to break it into categories, what we might call buckets of explanation. Michael Collins's alleged line, "They told me not to tell anyone what I saw near the moon," invites speculation, but speculation without structure is chaos. So let us build 4 buckets. Bucket 1, operational debris. Apollo missions were messy by design. Stages were discarded, panels blown away, fuel vented into space. All of this became debris, tumbling unpredictably around the spacecraft. To an astronaut trained in precision, a piece of metal flashing sunlight could look alien for a split second. Bucket 2, optical illusion. Spacecraft windows are notorious for tricks of light. A reflection from an instrument, a shaft of sunlight bending across the glass, or even a particle bouncing inside could appear as a glowing shape outside. In the stark contrast of lunar shadow and brilliance, the human eye is easy to deceive. Bucket 3, natural phenomena. Space is not empty. Micrometeoroids, cosmic rays, and high-contrast lunar features could all spark momentary anomalies. Even Earth itself, rising on the horizon, has startled astronauts into double takes. Collins may have witnessed something entirely natural, but framed by solitude, it lingered in his mind. Bucket 4, the extraordinary. This is the one the public clings to, the suggestion that Collins saw something beyond human explanation. The UFO narrative has long attached itself to Apollo, and while this remains the least supported, it is the most irresistible in popular imagination. The weight of silence. After Apollo 11, the world showered Armstrong and Aldrin with fame. Their names became synonymous with courage, exploration, even national pride. Michael Collins, by contrast, stepped quietly away. He left NASA within a year, taking on the role of director at the Smithsonian's brand new National Air and Space Museum. Instead of basking in personal glory, he chose to curate humanity's collective history of flight. Under his guidance, the museum became one of the most visited institutions in the world. Collins wrote books too. Carrying the Fire remains one of the most respected astronaut memoirs, but his tone was consistent, thoughtful, restrained, never sensational. He joked about being the loneliest man alive, but made clear he never felt neglected. To him, his mission was duty, not drama. That is why the so-called admission attributed to him feels so strange. He was not a man of wild theories. In interviews, he often deflected questions about UFOs or hidden secrets. He focused instead on engineering, teamwork, and the sheer audacity of Apollo. His silence became part of his identity. Unlike Aldrin, who occasionally entertained speculative questions, Collins was the anchor, the one who kept both spacecraft and stories grounded. Perhaps that is the paradox of Michael Collins, a man who avoided the spotlight but could not escape being mythologized. By saying so little, he left room for the world to imagine everything. Why the story stuck. Humanity craves mystery. The Apollo program, for all its triumphs, was also an engineering showcase that left little to the imagination. Checklists, telemetry, precise maneuvers, success measured in seconds and millimeters. Yet, people wanted more. They wanted hidden chapters, secrets in the shadows, whispers from the men who had looked upon another world. Michael Collins was the perfect vessel for that longing. Armstrong had already become a symbol too large, his words carved into history. Aldrin was outspoken, sometimes unpredictable, willing to entertain questions about unidentified objects. But Collins, quiet, measured, almost invisible in the narrative, was the one no one expected. If even he hinted at a hidden truth, it must mean something. The image is irresistible. The loneliest human being in history, orbiting in silence, staring out into a black infinity. No witnesses, no cameras, no radio contact, only his eyes, his memory, and later, his conscience. When a single line is attributed to such a man, "They told me not to tell anyone what I saw near the moon," it becomes a magnet for fascination. Stories thrive not because they are proven, but because they fill a void. Collins's supposed confession fills the biggest void of all, the silence of space. It plays on our collective suspicion that governments conceal, that astronauts know more than they reveal, that history holds back the most tantalizing truths. And so the story stuck, not because evidence supported it, but because the man least likely to utter it became its alleged source. It is a paradox worthy of myth. The astronaut who sought anonymity becoming, in death, the center of one of Apollo's most enduring mysteries. So where does that leave us? After the drama, the speculation, and the whispered quote, what can we actually say with confidence? First, the facts. The Apollo 11 mission is one of the most heavily documented events in human history. Every orbit, every maneuver, every system check was recorded. Michael Collins himself kept detailed notes, later published in his memoir, Carrying the Fire. Nowhere in the official record is there evidence of an unexplained sighting or a directive to stay silent about one. NASA's transcripts, available to the public for decades, contain no such line. Second, the claim. The PDF and accounts like it present a striking sentence. "They told me not to tell anyone what I saw near the moon." But stripped of context, it is unverifiable. Was it misquoted? Was it allegorical? Was it a rumor retroactively attached to Collins's name after his passing? We cannot know. Third, the man. Collins was not a trickster, not a man seeking late-life headlines. He lived a life of dignity and understatement. That does not prove he never saw anything unusual, but it does suggest that, had he wanted to disclose it, he would have done so clearly and without theatrics. As journalists, the verdict must be sober. This is a claim, not a confession. It is compelling because it collides with the image of Collins we thought we knew. It is powerful because it leaves questions unanswered. But it is not evidence. To call it proof would be to betray the very discipline that made Apollo succeed in the first place. Michael Collins deserves to be remembered not for a mysterious quote, but for what he actually accomplished, keeping the fragile lifeline to Earth intact, alone in the silence of lunar orbit, ensuring that humanity's first steps on another world could be followed by a safe return home.